my friends, and welcome to A Touch of History, brought to you by the Tees Valley International Film Festival. Now, today's episode tells the story of Stanley Arthur Jefferson, better known to the world as Stan Laurel.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. What are we going to do? I'm scared to death.
Now, this film is not going to focus on the outstanding body of work that Stan and his comedy partner Oliver Hardy achieved when they found fame and fortune in America. That is already well documented and celebrated. This film is going to concentrate on the first 15 years of Stan's life, which he spent in several towns in the north of England. The first of which was his birth town of Ulverston.
You're born at Ulverston in Lancashire, England, right, Stan?
While Ulverston was Stan's birth town, his precise place of birth in the town was this house, number 3 Argyle Street, where Stan was born in 1890. Now, the name of the house has changed since 1890. It was previously known as Foundry Cottages. By the looks of things, they've had the windows done since then as well. But without trying to look through the windows too much, we can see that the current owners have very much embraced the fact that Stan Laurel was born in this very house. Now, he was a very sickly baby, was our Stan, and on the day of his birth, he wasn't expected to make it through the night. Thankfully, he did. However, when his dad, Arthur Jefferson, who was referred to as AJ, was offered a job to run a theatre in his native Bishop Auckland in County Durham, Stan was too ill to make the move with his family. So he remained here at number 3 Argyle Street with his mother's mother, who he lovingly referred to as Grandma Metcalf. Stan lived in Ulverston until the age of 6. And despite being away from his parents, they still had a good relationship. "We were seldom together," said Stan. "I was either away at boarding school or living with my grandparents at Ulverston. But strange as it may seem, we were still a very close family." Stan's passion for performance was clearly influenced by his parents, AJ and Margaret. On this site, somewhere, stood the Hippodrome Theatre, where Stan's dad was the manager and actor. Now, Margaret, after meeting AJ, she took up acting as well and actually forged a very successful career in acting, which blossomed very, very quickly. Now, obviously, the Hippodrome Theatre is no more. The reason for that is it burnt to the ground in 1910, which, funnily enough, is also the year that Stan left for America. Coincidence? You decide. After Stan hit the big time in the US of A, he did actually return to Ulverston on several occasions. One of the most notable being in 1947, where Stan and his dear friend and comedy partner, Oliver Hardy, attended this building here, the Coronation Hall, where they were invited to attend a civic reception in their honour. Now, on that day, somewhere around here, an open-top car pulled up, and Laurel and Hardy, accompanied by their wives, got out and were met by an adoring crowd of hundreds. Up on this balcony here, Stan and Ollie came to address the crowd, where Stan was presented with a copy of his birth certificate by the Mayor of Ulverston. And in 2009, to commemorate that wonderful day that is ingrained in Ulverston folklore, the good people of the town, unveiled by Ken Dodd no less, erected this statue of Stan and Ollie. So I think it's fair to say that Ulverston always has and always will embrace its Stan Laurel heritage. And despite all the blue plaques and statues and landmarks we've shown you here, let me now show you the highest honour that Ulverston can bestow upon a person. He named a pub after him. And so to Bishop Auckland, where the townsfolk also named a pub after our man Stan. But this one is in the name his parents gave him. Speaking of his parents, they lived here, number 67 Princess Street in Bishop Auckland. Now, they lived here without Stan, but with his 3 siblings. Now, Stan did visit here on occasion with his Grandma Metcalf, but he was only able to do so for the first time when he was 2 years old because he was such a sickly child. Now, as you can see, it's a similar size and shape to Grandma Metcalf's house, and the Jeffersons lived here for about 5 years. Now, before Stan rejoined them and began to live with his family once more, they moved here to Waldron Street. Now, as you can see, this is a much, much bigger house. Don't forget, it's 1895, and to live in a property of this size in late Victorian times in a mining town in the northeast of England was a big deal. The Jeffersons at this point were not skint. Now, as I mentioned before, over at Princes Street, IJ and Margaret lived with their three siblings, Stan's three siblings. 3 became 4 in this house, however, when Stan's younger sister, Olga, was born. Right here. Now, this house on Waldron Street was ideal for Stan's dad because it was just down the road from his place of work, which we're going to walk to now. Now, Stan's dad, Mr. Jefferson Sr., he went from being the manager of the Hippodrome Theatre in Ulverston to being the leaseholder of what was known as the Theatre Royal in Bishop Auckland. And it was that step up, along with his hard work and his ambition, that paid for the move to the bigger house. Now, AJ was very much the impresario with a good head for business. He was a master of marketing as well. It was he that rebranded and redesigned the theatre as the Eden Theatre in honour of a local family of prominence whose son, Anthony Eden, went on to be Prime Minister in the 1950s, successor to one Winston Churchill, no less. Now, the Eden Theatre was based around here. It was a big place, but as you can see, it's no longer here. It was demolished in 1974. Prior to that, it was a bingo hall and it was a cinema, but when it was a theatre, it was the top venue of its time in the region. And because of that, this area is now called Theatre Corner, and also, that's why this is here. This is St James's, the school that Stan went to. He probably only attended the place for a year or two because his time in County Durham wasn't that long. Now, the reason for that was because of his dad's success in his job. It wasn't too long before the call of the footlights and the smell of the grease paint led to another move, this time a little bit further north, just north of the River Tyne, to North Shields. Dockeray Square, to be more precise. Right here, in fact. You can see a blue plaque commemorates the fact that Stan Laurel lived here. It blows me away to think that Stan Laurel lived here, like, walked up and down these paths, had his dinner in there, slept upstairs. But he did, because he lived here for about 5 years. And that is the reason why there's a statue of our main man Stan just over here. Here he is. All right, Stan. Now, the Jefferson family lived here in Dockeray Square until 1902, when they moved yet again. But this time it wasn't for work reasons. Well, it kind of was. It was because they were doing really well at that time. Stan's mum's acting career was really beginning to flourish, and his father, AJ, was gaining a huge reputation for making a great success and bringing some of the biggest names of his time to every single theatre he worked in. And it was that success that funded a move to a much bigger house in North Shields called Ayton House. Now, we're not going to take you there today for 2 reasons. First of all, because it was knocked down in the 1930s, it is now a lovely housing estate. And the second reason was they didn't live there too long at all. But we can show you a picture of the house. Now, the reason the Jefferson family didn't stay at Ayton House for too long was because shortly after they moved in, the theatre industry in the northeast began to falter a little bit, and there simply wasn't the level of work to sustain living in a big house like Ayton House. So guess what? They moved again. This time, they moved even further north, to Glasgow, in fact. This is St Peter's Church, by the way, in Bishop Auckland. This is where Stan and his sister Olga were christened. Now, upon completion of his studies, Stan was put to work by his father at the Metropole Theatre in Glasgow, which AJ owned. Now, the job that Stan's dad gave him, it wasn't actor, it wasn't even stagehand. In fact, it was nothing to do with performance whatsoever. No, the job Stan's dad gave him was ticket collector. A few years after this, in 1910, at the age of 20 years old, Stan Laurel set sail for America as part of an acting troupe that included Charlie Chaplin. Now, Charlie and Stan were great friends. When they arrived in America, they actually roomed together before they forged their own paths to great success. The name of this street is not a coincidence, by the way. So as we come to the end of this film, we find ourselves back in Ulverston. Because I think it's fair to say, of all the towns we visited in the making of this film, Ulverston's the place that Stan really called home. Now, when he was a boy, Stan loved to fish. And he'd do so in the local canal, which is just over there. And he'd pass through Ulverston Cemetery to make his way home to his house, which is just over there. Now, in 1932, whilst being interviewed by a journalist from the Daily Herald outside a theatre in London's Leicester Square, where Stan was performing that night, they both looked up to see Stan's name in lights. And the journalist said, "That must make you proud." And Stan said, "Well, it's great, but it seems kind of wasteful. But you should see a lighthouse on a tombstone in a cemetery in Ulverston where I was born. They put it up when I was a kid. And to me, it was the 8th wonder of the world. And ever since then, I've dreamt of having a tombstone with a lighthouse on it." At the age of 74, Stan Laurel had a heart attack. And 4 days later, on the 23rd of February 1965, he died. Now, it's said that just a few hours before he slipped away, as he sat in his armchair in his hospital room in California, he said to the nurse who was looking after him, "I wish I was skiing." To which the nurse replied, "I didn't know you skied, Mr. Laurel." And Stan said, "I don't, but anything's better than this."
I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, so let's take a chance to do a new dance. For I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing la 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 la. All the folks have all gone wild, oh what a howdy do. It is because two funny chaps thought of more something new. Side by side you start to glide, forget all your troubles, let everything slide. For I'm cuckoo and you're cuckoo, sing la 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 la.